welcome to this online event. In some ways, like a town hall online. In this new online world we're all navigating together. So I want to welcome you on this Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. All of us are in lockdown, so thank you for making time on this weekend anyway. So this is an online event which is being convened by Latrobe City Council with the support of BRV, Bushfire Recovery Victoria, and an extensive range of state agencies which are here today as well. So my name's Henry Folks. I'm a facilitator for the Group Work Centre, and I've been asked to be here today to facilitate this session. So I'm here as an impartial voice, enabling as many people to contribute as possible. So that's my role today. I'm not really involved in the content per se, but instead to make sure that we use this space really well, and that we hear each other in this session. So a couple of brief housekeeping pieces in this online space to help us for things to go well. So in regards to your microphones, you notice at the bottom left of your screen, there's like a mute button. And if you can have your, here we go. Thanks, Cass. If you can have the bottom left there, that's the mute. If you can have that off, unless you're speaking, so if you can have that off for most of it, it just helps because of background noises and things. And if you, in regards to when we do get to the section where we'll hear from the community, or when anyone's speaking, when you are going to ask a question, if you can do the raise hand function. So that's down the bottom. There's a button which says reactions. So you can click on reactions, and in that there's a button which says raise hand. So that's what will kind of direct you to when you need to ask a question, because then it automatically just pops you up on our screen so we don't miss you. Another one just on Zoom, check your speaker view. The top right hand corner, there's a thing which the view, and some of you might have spent days on Zoom just to make sure we're all on the same page. The top right hand corner, there's speaker view. And when that's on the normal view, you can either be on gallery view, where you can see all the screens, or you can go to speaker view, which just has the person speaking. So see what works for you. The other thing in regards to Zoom is, thanks for that, Cass, we really encourage you to have your video on if possible. One of the weird things, if we're in a space together in person, we'd be able to see you all, and it's just more relational. It's not just speaking into the void, or it just makes it a bit more human. So I really encourage you, if you feel comfortable to put your video on so we can see you, especially if you're sharing. It's great to see your face. The other thing, just to name around sharing the airspace today, is that we'll go through the agenda as we go, but when you have a chance to ask questions, we'll just need to do our best. Well, I'll be, as a facilitator, doing my best to share the voices. So you might have many questions. There might just be a chance for kind of one or two. So I'll kind of check in with you in regards to that, but we want to give as many people as possible to be able to share. The other piece is that on Zoom is the chat function down the bottom. I really encourage you to use that chat as you go. We'll be watching that, and that's a place where you can kind of ask questions and things throughout when there's different briefings and things, and we'll capture those as we go, and we'll come back to them. So anytime you want to kind of comment during when someone's doing a briefing, or any questions arise, please direct them to the chat and we'll come back to that. Just to name around recording, and the final piece of housekeeping is that we're recording it because people who can't come here, so they can watch this later. So that's the housekeeping, the really exciting stuff. Thanks for bearing with me. So in a moment, we're going to go through a few of the organizations, and and later we'll hear from. I'll introduce all of the different agencies who are here. So before we do, I'll take you through the process, but just to say the schedule is we've got 1.5 hours, so we'll finish it. We're aiming to finish at 5 o'clock today, so 1.5 hours. So first of all, now I'd like to pass it to Carol Flynn, Acting CEO of BRV, Bushfire Recovery Victoria, to officially welcome everyone and to open the session.
Thanks, Henry.
Sorry.
And I'm a Carmel.
Thanks, Carmel.
Right.
Carmel. Yeah, sorry, Carmel. Off you go.
No problem. Thanks, Henry. And yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carmel Flynn, and I'm from Bushfire Recovery Victoria. I'd like to acknowledge the Brayakalung people of the Gunai-Kurnai Nation, the traditional owners of the land on which our communities here today live. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I also acknowledge other elders and Aboriginal people who are here today. Thank you. Back to you, Henry.
Thanks, Carmel. Sorry to get your name wrong. I just wanted to, I guess, model making mistakes nice and early so we can all feel a bit more comfortable to speak in the space today. So I want to quickly go through the agenda and the purpose for today as we're kind of orienting ourselves. So the purpose of today is really to continue the joint effort of dealing with the fallout of this massive event. So a lot of you people's personal lives, businesses, farms, and local communities have taken a huge hit as a result of this event. And so it's vital to fully hear the details of what's happened so that the right actions can take place. So we welcome today both your stories and experiences that will help ensure that there is an ongoing strategic response to the situation. So there's a huge number of organizations involved and who have been involved in the response and recovery that has occurred since the June storm event. So it gives you a sense of the complexity, which a lot of you, all of you are obviously aware of, but the complexity of the recovery and the commitment that has come from so many different groups. So the aim today is to ensure that your questions and concerns are caught and processed by those responsible for this ongoing response. So it's really important that you know that the agencies and support organizations are here. It's important you know which ones are here, because and to know that they're here to support you. So in a moment, we're going to hear an update from the Emergency Management Commissioner, Andrew Crisp. And we're also going to hear from Carmel Flynn, the acting CEO of BRV. So they're going to give us some context of their role in all of this, in all that's happened. After a brief overview from the SES of the event and what happened, because it was a while ago, that'll help give us a sense of the scale and impact of this event. After that, we'll also hear from the CEO of Latrobe City Council, Steve Piacente. I hope I pronounced that right, Steve. And that's to hear from those many organizations who have been part of this massive response. So finally, we'll kind of just introduce you quickly to each other representatives who is here. So what I was thinking, before we do go to Andrew to hear from you, it'd be lovely to hear, just to get the voice of the community members in this space if possible, just to give a quick opportunity to hear your name and the community you're located in or you're representing. It's not a chance to share your stories, but it's a chance just to get to hear your voice and just for us to see you. And so that this is by choice, but it also to help us orient to the Zoom. So if you'd like to just share, to introduce yourself, just to say, hi, this is my name and this is where I'm coming from. If you can just go to reactions down the bottom, if you can pop your video on, go to reactions down the bottom and click raised hand, and then I'll just call your name out and you can unmute yourself and share. It just helps us to be a little bit more human on Zoom. Awesome. Great. I can see a few. Yeah, keep raising those hands. That's great. Carolyn, do you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Boothman. I'm one of the members on the Community Recovery Committee that's been working to deal with the bushfire prior to this event, and now we'll also pick up the storm and flood recovery work.
Great. Thanks, Carolyn. A lot going on over there. Thank you. And Peter.
Thanks, Henry. My name is Peter Quigley. I'm a property owner in this Bonds Road in our south, and I also represent, we've got the family farm. So a number of family members have been affected by this event, and I was the lucky one that was charged with following stuff up on behalf of my family.
Good on you, Peter. Thanks for introducing yourselves. John.
Thanks, Henry. I'm John Harris. I'm a resident of Jeeralang Junction, but also involved with the Community Recovery Committee, working for the last couple of years on the recovery from the bushfire 2019, and we might have some extra work to do shortly. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, John. Anybody else like to introduce themselves? Raise your hand. Last call. No? No worries. Well, I just want to welcome you all. So thank you for sharing your voice in the room, John, Carolyn, and Peter, just to get things rolling. So now I want to, we're going to hear from Andrew, and we're going to hear from Carmel, Russell, and Steve, as I mentioned. So for each of you, you've got 5 minutes each to share. Just in the spirit, for time's sake, I'll keep a track of it if you can as well, but I'll give you just a gentle nudge. I'll just come off mute just to let you know when there's a minute to go, just to keep us going. So I want to start by inviting, sorry, my screen just went. Andrew Crisp, if you would like to come off mute and jump in and introduce yourself and go from there. Thanks, Andrew.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
All right, great. Thanks very much, Henry. And can I also thank Carmel for that really strong acknowledgement of country. So I certainly echo those comments. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues from emergency services, local government, and all the key partners that play such a critical role in keeping our community safe. But in particular, certainly want to thank and acknowledge the community members that are here today, because it is, as Henry said in his introductory comments, it is all about, how we do things better next time round. So it is about learning. And that's very much the approach that I've taken from day dot in this job. It's about, looking, listening and learning. And in terms of this particular event, I've travelled everywhere from Trentham to Traralgon, and probably most of the areas impacted by this flood and storm event. I've also had the opportunity to attend a number of different community meetings. And again, this is another one of those where I know that I will be listening intently, and there are opportunities well and truly to learn from this event. There is a structure in the way that we do that. And I just want to give the local government, the community, the confidence that we do take this seriously. We always have done about learning those lessons from previous events. So with this particular event, we've developed a coordinated learning review framework. And there are so many different elements to this that have impacted on you, the community. And we know that we need to pick up on those. So as part of this framework, there'll be a specific piece of work that would be picked up that looks at energy. So we know, power that was out for many people for extended periods of time. So a particular piece of work around that. Another piece of work around telecommunications. So we know that, energy had an impact on telecommunications. So that's another piece. Roads and transport more generally. So a specific piece around that. Also, our agencies will be doing their own work. Local government will be debriefing what they've done, how we affected control at an incident, a regional and a state level. So we'll pick up those particular pieces of work, and that will sit as part of this framework. Another particular piece of work that I know will be of particular interest to many communities is about public information and warnings. Did we get that right? Did we push out our warnings in a timely way? Were they accurate enough? Did the community understand what we wanted the community to do? Was our public information messaging as strong as it could have been? So for that particular piece of work, we've engaged a consultant who's experienced in our emergency management framework, and we'll be doing that work. As part of that, they have already started. They've already looked at what did occur in terms of the messaging that went out from the Bureau and from incident region and state. They'll be doing some further engagement with local government, with Steve, the CEO, to better understand how better they can then connect in with communities, listen to what communities got to say about public information and warnings. We've also engaged a marketing company which will undertake a broad community sentiment piece of work. So other ways of actually getting in and listening to what the community has to say about this particular event. We will pull all that together. We'll look at trends and themes. We'll do the analysis, and there will be a public-facing report. There'll be a public report that will be available that will highlight the lessons and the learnings out of this particular event. We won't shy away from what those opportunities are. We are, as I said, very focused on learning. And as part of that, I went through all those various pieces of work that we're looking at, but it's also the great work that BRV are doing and these community meetings where everyone that they run, I will do my absolute best to get here and listen again to what community have to say about the flood and storm event. I'm not very good at picking up on subtle hints. I don't know if there was a firmer hint, but that's probably it for me, Henry. As I said, more important for me to listen to what people have got to say.
No worries, Andrew. You're actually under time, 4 minutes. Had time to spare if there's anything else you wanted to add. Good, cool.
No,
Thank
it's okay.
you.
I know a number of the community meetings on this, and I know, and great, it's great. I know they're not backward in coming forward, so let's give them the time.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate your time. So we're now going to go to Carmel Flynn. Carmel is acting CEO of BRV, Bushfire Recovery Victoria, and Carmel is going to discuss BRV's role in the June 9th and 10th storm event. So why BRV are here today. So I'll hand over to you now, Carmel.
Yeah, thanks, Henry, and I'll be brief as well. I would just like to also introduce my colleague, Kane Trist, who's with me today, and Kane is the Regional Director for BRV, who is working in place really closely with the City of Latrobe and directly with communities. I did want to just take the opportunity to introduce BRV and why we're here, because it's not necessarily intuitive as to why an organisation called Bushfire Recovery Victoria is working following floods and storms. But BRV was established after the 1920 bushfires to provide support and assistance to communities and local councils affected by those massive fires, and we were established as an enduring and ongoing organisation. So, quite simply, after this event, which was an incredibly severe event across the state, the storms and floods of the 9th and 10th of June, we were also asked to step in and provide assistance to those communities who were affected by this event. And our role is to support the City of Latrobe in their responsibilities to lead lead recovery at the local level by making sure that communities get the right support at the right time and in a coordinated way. So we know that there's a long tail of recovery. It will take time, and it's really important that if communities want to take this leadership role, and I know Sean and Carolyn are here today saying, yes, we're here to do that, then by community advocating into local and state government saying, this is what we need, our job is to make sure that is delivered in a coordinated way, because there are so many state agencies that work in this space. And there are often wicked problems that require different state agencies and local agencies to come to the table together, and BRV plays a role in leading that process. BRV's also been asked to lead a state coordinated cleanup program for private properties, and we're doing that in partnering with the Johns Lyng Group. So that program also has kicked off. And over the course of this afternoon, I'm very happy, as is Kane, to take any questions or provide information around recovery in general, and also around the cleanup program. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmel. Appreciate that context. Now, we're now going to hear from Russell from the SES. So Russell's going to give a bit of a debrief of the storm event, give a bit of context and scene setting in terms of the statewide nature and the intensity of the impact, community, and the comparison, etc. So give us a bit of an overview. And just to maybe name that, as Russell does give like an overview, just to name that this can be a bit stirring to remember these kind of events. So just to do what you need to do to kind of look after yourself as you're hearing and remembering the event. So Russell, just to let you know around time, we're actually doing well for time. So if you do need an extra couple of minutes, that's fine.
Thanks, Henry.
So,
can you see my screen?
I can.
Fantastic.
Yep.
So that you can see the first slide.
Yeah, I can see it. Gippsland Region Extreme
That's
Weather
correct, yep.
Event,
No worries.
June 2021.
That's it. So thanks, Henry, and good afternoon, community members of Latrobe City, the Latrobe City CEO, BRV, the Emergency Management Commissioner, and other agencies. So my role here today is just to provide a bit of a broad overview of the actual situation that occurred back in June 2021, and people probably remember the dates of the 9th and 10th. I've got about 5 minutes or a little bit extra to talk about some of the things that actually occurred and just to give you a brief overview of what led up to the incident. So I'll take it away. These are our values, so SES's values, and we always start by presenting these during our slides and presentations. And one of the ones that are important to us today with Vic SES is we are part of our community, and we certainly are part of Latrobe City and the community. And it's all about two words that I learnt last week from the meeting from the Emergency Management Commissioner. It's all about listening and learning. So they're two words that I'll be taking away, is listening and learning. So this is the background of that particular event. So throughout the night of Wednesday, the 9th of June, and into the following day, Victoria experienced a severe weather event with strong winds and heavy rain, which caused widespread damage, flooding and power outages. What would unfold would be the busiest 24 hours in the history of the Vic SES, with over 9,000 requests for assistance in a single week. An initial flood watch for Gippsland was issued on Tuesday, the 8th of June, with rainfall totals of 60 to 100 expected across the flood watch area through Wednesday and Thursday, with up to 150 to 250 likely about the ranges. The focus of the heaviest rainfall at that time would be across West and South Gippsland. The Bureau of Meteorology warned 19 catchments could be impacted, with minor to moderate flooding across West Gippsland and the Mitchell River catchment from late Wednesday evening, with major flooding possible. On top of that, a severe weather warning for damaging winds was issued on Wednesday, the 9th of June for West and South Gippsland and parts of East Gippsland. A severe weather warning for heavy rainfall was issued as well on Wednesday, the 9th of June for heavy rainfall developing about West Gippsland and Central Highlands. So we can see now with that heavy rainfall falling into the tree canopies, making them heavy with those heavy gusts of wind over 100 kilometres an hour, where we're going to develop some serious issues. The East Coast low would deliver heavy rain leading to flooding and damaging destructive winds, and was expected to have multiple centres that would influence the location and timing of this heavy rain. So at one point, we just didn't know where the rainfall was going to turn up. 24-hour rainfall totals from late Wednesday morning to late Thursday morning were expected to be 70 to 120 across the warning area, reaching 150 to 250 about higher terrain in West Gippsland. And I'll show a couple of slides shortly about some of the rainfall that we did have. The catchments were already saturated across West and South Gippsland and wet to moderately wet through East Gippsland. And people would see the warnings coming out today too. So we're still pretty much saturated across all parts of East Gippsland. These are some of the warnings that were issued on that Wednesday, the 9th of June. We had a major flood warning come through at 3:52, another one at 4:19, another one at 4:27, a moderate at 4:43, another moderate at 5:43, and then another major for the Traralgon Creek at 1:59 a.m. on Thursday, the 10th. So it was pretty dynamic. The Victorian government declared a state energy emergency after flooding caused cracking at the Yallourn Power Station's Morwell River diversion wall. The trains were suspended between Traralgon and Bairnsdale, and an increased risk of beach erosion was present due to the swells that were impacting the Gippsland beaches. And if anybody looked over that period of time, you would have seen on Vic Emergency there on that particular app, all the zones there, which were indicating the warning areas and the jobs and the SES and other partner agencies were receiving. So it was very busy for everybody. The daily rainfall totals for Victoria on the 10th to the 6th, you can see there on the right-hand side in millimetres and the colours. And right over us, we experienced 150 plus in rainfall totals. Some magnitudes across the region, so just over the 9th, 10th and 11th there, across the top of the dates and the locations which indicate where the rain gauges were. And we can see Mount Bor 280 there, Erica 181, Bularo 137. So they're all quite high totals. And as reported in the Warragul Gazette, 204 in less than 24 hours at Walhalla. And people would have seen the destruction that caused that rainfall there. Some river flows across the region. So again, down the left-hand side, we have our rivers, we have the gauges, the dates, the time that river actually peaked and the height, and then the flood class level. And you can see there, major, 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 moderate, major, moderate, minor, moderate, major, minor, moderate. So there was quite a lot happening with that amount of rain that we had. These are the warnings that were issued over the time. So over the 8th of June to the 14th of June, there was 289 warnings actually issued. And you can see there was some advice messages for flood watchers. You would have received some today. There was minor flood warnings, final flood warnings, moderates, major, severe. There was some emergency warnings issued, some evacuation now, and then some all clear. So over that period of 6 days, 289 messages. Some of the impacts across the Gippsland region was that 5 of our 6 LGAs had impacts, and that included 48 regional towns. Lots of towns and communities were isolated, some for several days, and we heard about that at the last community meeting. Access was cut to most roads and major highways by flooding or trees, which again compounded the isolation of local communities and made it difficult for emergency services to actually gain access to those communities. There was widespread power and telecommunication outages. There was stock loss, so there was sheep, there was pasture loss, hay loss, fences destroyed and infrastructure destroyed. There was damage to roads and bridges through erosion, landslides and trees down. And at the start of the incident, so right at the beginning, there was 196 road closures that were reported through Regional Roads Victoria and the local government authority. And that was predominantly from road flooding and trees down across roads. The parks were closed, including Wilson's Prom. There was storm damage affecting those roads there. Great Alpine Road, Bor, we saw there the state forest around the Thompson Dam. There was the plantation that was 258 hectares with plantation destroyed. There was residential properties that were impacted with above floor flooding, commercial properties. There were communities that were evacuated. Some of the community impacts, as you would have seen on the news and heard, Terrelgan, many houses and businesses close to Terrelgan Creek were impacted from overflow and yard flooding, many roads inundated, inundation of recreation reserves and other parks around Terrelgan, the Mantra Car Park, the Plaza, large areas of farmland, many rescues occurred, trees uprooted and debris, mud everywhere, communities isolated like yourselves, and there was roadblocks for some time. The response for that period from the 9th to the 13th, 1,185 requests for assistance for SES, so that doesn't include all the calls that Latrobe City would have received also for trees down and other damage. It was a multi-agency response from all key agencies working as one. We had task forces and incident management team staff from all over the state, SES-wise, coming to assist in our partner agencies, and the Bairnsdale and Terrelgan Incident Control Centre operated for that period 24/7. Just SES volunteer hours, 17,363 hours over the 5 days. There was extensive support from the business community and members of the community like yourself in support of our volunteers, partner agencies, forest fire management crews as well, trying to clean up those trees across roads. And a road planning operations cell was activated to manage the vast number of roads that were closed across the region. And that's it, Henry, in a bit of a quick overview.
Thanks, Russell. It was quick and a lot. Wow, what a huge few days it was. All those numbers and figures. I know for me, I'm just digesting them. So thank you for that.
That's okay. And the presentation is on I believe on the Latrobe City website. I believe it's been put up there if anybody wants to go back and have a look at it.
Great. Thanks, Russell. and two of those community members, everyone who's heard it, you're all involved in this. Just there was that trigger warning at the beginning, and very much just to take a breath after that. It's a lot. It was a big few days, and just to remember some of those things can be stirred up as well. So just wanted to name that to you all. Taking a good breath can help. So now we're going to go to the final update, and this is from Steve Piacente, and Steve is the CEO of the Latrobe City Council. And so Steve's going to give an overview of the impact of that on the LGA and an update of recovery works which have happened / are happening. So Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Henry. Sorry about that. I was just had a community member call me about something else. So no
worries.
So I was on the phone. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again, Henry. My name's Stephen Piacente, CEO of Latrobe City. And there's no councillors here today, but this obviously session's been recorded. They did attend on Thursday, and there was also there's a few questions that have come in as well, Henry, that prior to this meeting, we'll get to those later. And also we're providing some frequently asked questions after the meeting. So thought I'd mention that. So yeah, would obviously like to acknowledge Bushfire Recovery Victoria and thank Carmel and her team for supporting these engagement events, and also Andrew for being here. So thanks, Andrew. And all the government agencies. I did note in the chat there was quite a few that's listed there, and there's quite a few community members as well. So importantly, I'd like to thank the community members for their time for coming along this afternoon. So as the community would know better than I in terms of the South Ward and the areas that are impacted during this event, the challenges of Mother Nature can be significant and have had past impacts, and some of those already been spoken about in terms of previous bushfires. Obviously this year and last year with a pandemic and flood and storm event, it's been a little bit more difficult, particularly with the pandemic, to engage with the community, and these forums aren't ideal in terms of being online, but it is a good opportunity, as you said, Henry, for people to come together and ask any questions they have. So Andrew touched on a review that's underway and being considered, and my team's also been, as Andrew mentioned, getting some feedback around how we manage this event, and so the teams are doing some work internally as part of that as well. So obviously the storm and damage in the Yanar South and Budgeree area was, from what my team tell me, and one of the largest, particularly for some staff have been around for a very long time in their lifetime, but largest in terms of flood and storm damage since 2009. And there's been significant impacts, obviously, on the landscape, the road network, but also, as Carmel touched on personal property. So just in terms of the impact to assets managed by Latrobe City, there was over 300 kilometres of road networks impacted in terms of people that we've assessed, around 900 families and 1,700 people. The team registered at information and relief centres, and secondary impact assessments are around 720 odd in terms of individuals' properties. And over, pleasingly, there was 266 referrals to the Gippsland Emergency Relief Fund, and they provided over $600,000 worth of funds that they distributed to the community. So they immediately kicked into their program and provided that direct funding as part of this event, which was good to see. As part of the initial response and under the direction of the Incident Control as SES at the time, council officers got to work, and our operations team particularly worked around the hours in trying conditions, removing fallen trees, as you would well know, clearing debris from roadsides. And that initial response was obviously supported by many in the community, including contractors, and they did an amazing job. So I'd just like to thank them for that. Obviously, the immediate focus during the event was to ensure safety of the community, ensuring access and egress, but that did take some time, and there was a lot of impacts across the city. And again, I'd like to thank the many members of the community who lent their hands to others in that time of need. There's been many stories of people who demonstrated their resilience and support for others and got on with the job in terms of clearing and providing access. And also, obviously, staff and volunteers who helped the emergency service agencies get the job done in pretty trying conditions and appalling weather. And we do understand that many in the community might be frustrated by the progress of recovery works, and can assure you our crews and contractors have been hard at it. And as of today, there's about 364 kilometres of road networks covering about 75 different roads that have been cleared of trees. There's still work to be done though. And that initial activity has been carried out on about 260 kilometres of roads, but there is still remediation work to be done in terms of patching and grading and clearing of drains and culverts. Most of the trees at this stage have been cleared, but there's still some more work to be done. And to put that in perspective, the scale of the works, the trees that have been cleared, that covers a distance of a return trip from Traralgon to Melbourne, the team tell me. And that essential initial work might take another 5 to 7 weeks to complete. But beyond that, there's obviously still significant restoration work. So we've identified around 18 landslips across various locations, and they'll take a little longer to assess and remediate. So there's things like design that needs to be done and reconstruction works need to happen as part of those, but that could take some time. We will need to prioritise those, and Kane has a working group from BRV working across the councils, so I understand, to help us plan that work. And there is a large culvert, I understand, on Switchback Road that's high on our priority list for reconstruction. And we'll continue to prioritise our works and ensure that we communicate with the community. So you might have seen on our Facebook page or social media, there's a weekly update, lists all the roads and the like that have been impacted, and what our scheduled road activities are particular, so people can keep up to date with that. But we understand the impacts of this event will be felt for some time, and officers from our emergency management team will continue to support and work with impacted residents, importantly, so they're still out there doing that work. There was initial funding provided to those community members who were impacted. That's closed, but officers are still assisting. I know of some community members who are still being assisted, being linked into relevant government agencies, not-for-profit agencies, to assist with things like fencing or support for livestock, along with personal and emotional support. And with BRV being involved in this event, which we haven't seen before, it's slightly different in the past. So they're, as Carmel said, doing the coordination across a number of local government areas, and we do look forward to continuing to work with them throughout the recovery efforts. I would like to thank all the council officers for the relief work and recovery work that they've done. Of note, particularly our emergency management teams, road maintenance and city presentation teams who've been able to manage and action the ongoing assessment, cleanup and remediation. We've also had our business development team assisting and also obviously our communications team. But like any emergency event, it takes a whole team approach to support our community, and that's not just us, it's the community members as well that have done a lot of great work in terms of this particular event. And so there's still more to come. So we'll keep you updated. We had set up an email address for people to link into us. That was flood2021@latrobe.vic.gov.au, so people can contact us through there or just through our normal numbers. And as I said earlier, I do have a few questions that have come in previously. We can answer those a little bit later. And if people don't feel comfortable asking questions today, they can get in touch with us, our emergency management team, and follow up any particular issues they may have. So I'll leave it at that, Henry, for now. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Steve. And thank you, everyone. We had Andrew, Carmel, we had Andrew, Carmel, and Steve and Russell creating the context there. So really appreciate you all for your time. Now, before we do go into the hearing from you or from the community, what I want to do is just to let you know some of the other agencies who are here. So we had Steve there from the Latrobe City Council. We had Andrew, who spoke first up, who's the Emergency Management Commissioner. Carmel also mentioned Kane from BRV, Bushfire Recovery Victoria. Russell is also from the SES. So instead of going and hearing from you, I'm just going to list the different agencies who are here. So we have Ambulance who are represented. We've got Ambulance Victoria, West Gippsland CMA, the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. And if you want to give a wave as well on the screen, just so at least we can see if I've got your video on. We've got Parks Victoria, we've got AusNet, Department of Families, Fairness and Housing. We've got the CFA, Ag Victoria, HVP Plantations, Red Cross, and VicPol. So I want to thank you all for making the time to be here from the agencies. So now it's time to hear from you, from the community. So a couple of things to say. One is to remember that you can ask questions on the floor by raising the hand, as Peter's done there, by clicking on the reactions raise hand function. You can also ask a question in the chat. So we'll kind of alternate between them. And so we'll endeavour to get through all of them today, but if not, a written response will be made available to you on the council's website. And so the way to work is if you ask a question, and then those from the agencies who'd like to respond, if you can also raise your hand and we'll go to you from there if you've got a response. So let's get going into it. So Peter, you've got your hand up there first. So if we like to go to you, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question or share what you'd like to share.
How many times do you reckon people haven't unmuted themselves when they go to speak in the last year and a half? Be in the millions, wouldn't it? Sorry, Henry.
I reckon that's right. I reckon it's the most said one-liner.
Yeah. Remember the good old days. And hello to Rod. And there's half of my career is on this screen. So g'day to everybody that I've worked with previously. My question is really around, and I understand the EMV are conducting a review of the emergency response. Correct? Yes.
That's correct, Peter. We're coordinating that.
Andrew, can I ask a question? Does that include being able to take submissions, written submissions from members of the public on any aspect of the emergency event?
Yeah. There would be no problems around doing that. And so with that, as I said, we. The public information warnings one, we'll be connecting in with Steve very soon. But if there's something in particular you want to write about, more than happy to take any.
That's fine. I think that'll save me a lot of time and you guys a lot of time. I'll just put them in writing and submit them to that process, and they can they'll progress as required. I only got two other things, and I'm assuming Gail Gatt is now heading up community health and wellbeing. In terms of Gail, you'll be the principal contact as far as all this stuff goes with council. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, I can just say to the community that is an extremely positive move. That Gail's a terrific operator and it's probably reinstated some of my confidence in Latrobe City being able to adequately manage the response going forward. That's a plug. That's a positive, Gail, by the way. Gail's a great operator. Now, the one I have got, which is a concern, it's affected a number of farming properties mainly on Moore River, Billy's Creek and Middle Creek catchments. And I thank the CMA for coming out and having a look and walking over. Is the huge amount of silt that is now on what was productive farmland, which is just horrendous. And it's just, it's taken a huge amount of productive farming out of use, and it's led to further problems with feeding stock and finding. So and it probably goes back to a question for I think Ruth in terms of HPP. All your silt from all your and it's not all yours, I acknowledge that, but the majority of silt on our farmlands is from your plantations. And I've been up and I've had a look, and they've just been denuded from soil that's sitting on our farmlands. So question is, where's that going to end up? What's going to happen? Because farmers are sitting there looking at in some cases, 500 mil of silt sitting on farmland that's just a stinking, rotting, filthy mess. And so that's a question for anybody that can provide an answer, that'd be appreciated. And secondly, what is being done to ensure, and I'm sure that there are planning permit requirements around all of that with your logging operations, what's being done to monitor and enforce those? Because then it's just wreaked havoc on those three catchments. End of rant there, Henry.
Thank you, Peter, and appreciate you expressing nice and honestly. I really feel your frustration there in that, and your question quite directly around the silt. Now, you did mention Ruth in that. And just to say to the agencies, some of you have noticed you're struggling with, say, the hand raise function. That's right. Just come off mute if you're an agency and you'd like to respond. So go for it, Ruth, if you'd like to respond first.
Yes, Peter, we certainly aware of the concerns of many farmers and many people downstream of the plantations, and it's a huge concern for us as well. And one of the, I suppose, the really compounding factors has also been that a lot of this country has been impacted by fire in previous years. It's not only the 2019, but right back to the 2009 fires. All of that creates quite a lot of difficulty in managing soils, and it actually changes soil structures and things. We do abide by the Code of Forest Practices. That's the environmental standards that has been developed by the Victorian State Government, and we certainly abide by that. And unfortunately, we've had, just like many farmers around the area, we've actually had really significant landslips on our country. These hills go back a long way. There's been landslips there ever since they were first cleared for farming, and then it was recovered with forestry. And so it is an ongoing problem in the Strzelecki's, and it's not going to stop.
Thanks, Ruth. Peter, were you going to respond there? I've got Martin who's got his hand up as well.
I guess, yeah, look, I probably should have acknowledged, Ruth, that the same catchment got fire impacted 2 years ago. Not easy to recover from a fire like that. Understand that. But probably doesn't help any of the farmers. And I don't know that we're going to get help, but it would just be good to understand if any agency, apart from the CMA, and Dan has been terrific, Marty, he's been out here, nearly got his quad bike bogged, to have a look, but that's it. And there's hundreds of acres that have been taken out of probably the most productive farmland in Gippsland is no longer available. And farmers are struggling to feed we've had to destock because we can't feed our animals because of loss of probably 60% of our farm. And I know that there are dozens of farmers in the same boat that are scratching their head. So just some idea, if there's nothing that can be done, so be it, we'll battle on, but we just don't really know. Thank you again.
Thanks, Peter. So your question is there anything that can be done? And so I really appreciate it. I've got Martin, your hand's up there. Do you want to respond, Martin?
Peter, thanks for bringing it up, and thanks for acknowledging our guys going there and having a look. It is, as outlined earlier from the SES, just the dimension of the event and the ferocity of it is mind-blowing in many ways. And whilst it doesn't give anyone comfort, but what we've observed as we've travelled around, and because we intersect with farmers a fair bit, the mobilisation of sediment across the entire region has been really high, perhaps sometimes higher than other events that we've seen. So you're right, some of those heavier particulate matters that are on the floodplains now is pretty severe. So it's probably one of those ones that it probably needs another focus in and around perhaps some where there's any agricultural sort of advice, or that notion of, if it can't be removed, how do you live with it? As someone who grew up on a farm on the river flats, floods are actually seen as a pretty good thing for us because we used to get a reasonably good dose of nutrient-rich sediment. But I hear exactly what you're saying, Peter. This is beyond your fines and your bits of nutrients that help a farm. These are actually heavier particulate matter, and that's going to be a big challenge and something that I think is quite unique to this particular event. So leave it with us, because I reckon it's one for a few of us to put our heads together about, maybe not cleaning it up, but how it might be dealt with. And your point about longer term, how do you ensure it doesn't happen again in the future? Just to, again, give you some comfort that I've already had a couple of chats with our friends there at HVP about perhaps some of the broader catchment management options we've got into the future and how we might work together in terms of that sort of stuff. But it certainly doesn't sort the problem out for you today, Peter, but it maybe will give you some confidence that we are thinking about it and are going to try and address it for the future.
And if I just wonder, Marty, if it's worthwhile, rather than dealing with 50 farmers separately, the farmers could actually get together and assist you guys in this by, one channel of communications versus doing things 50 times. So we're sort of happy to undertake that within our community if that will assist both Ruth and yourself and whoever else. So if there's an action arising, I'm happy to do that on a community basis, I think.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for taking that out. Carmel, I've noticed your hand's up there as well. Did you want to respond? And then I'll go to your question, Sam.
Yes, just in relation to this one, although I'm not close to it, since Agriculture Victoria are on the line here today, it would be good just to get a sense of that they understand the issue and they've been including the matter in their assessments. It seems to me that this is a bit of a wicked problem, Peter, and that there are probably a number of agencies that need to come together to listen to the farmers and to do a bit of brainstorming about what might be possible. And so BRV is happy to be in that space. I think maybe in the first instance, if AgVic is here, do they mind just chipping in to giving us a sense that they're aware of the issue?
Hi, Peter. It's Del here from AgVic. Happy to. So when it comes to desilting and pasture renovation, we can help provide that advice on recovering pastures and desilting. I think that's part of your problem. It's if that helps, but removing the silt, I think that's a big issue.
Peter, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think just about everybody understands that removing the silt is just it's equivalent to you couldn't do it. It's just beyond. It's not reasonable, practical in any sense. But it's about now converting that, which is, pardon my language, it's just a pile of stinking shit. Pardon that, but that's the best way to describe it. To productive pasture and how to get there and what times are going to take, because it's not drying out anytime soon. So it's that sort of stuff that might give farmers a way forward versus just wallowing in it now, because it is quite, and I'll put the 2 big bobs worth in here in terms of the mental health impact of farmers that have a look at this stuff every day and have to either drive through it, around it, to feed cattle, to move cattle. It's just like a layer upon layer upon layer of storm again. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks Peter. I think we would like to take you up on the offer if there's a group of farmers who can, I guess jointly help us understand the scale of the issue and what are some possibilities there for you. And I'll just ask Kane to follow up after the meeting with you as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate you sharing. Thanks, Carmel, for rounding that out. And we're now going to go to you, Sam.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Sunderland. I live in Considine Drive in Yanar South, and I lost fencing and farm sheds in the storm. Thanks so much for getting these conversations going, and I really hope that there's more planned. And one of the reasons I say that is that I've got a couple, I guess, more about comments than questions. They might actually even be fixes in some respects. But I noticed that the chat is fairly tightly monitored, and questions can only be submitted to BRV privately. Are you aware that the community might actually be more engaged if they could see other questions that might be being asked to demonstrate that there's no such thing as a dumb question? And I think, that may actually be putting some people off. Just being a bit more open and transparent might be a bit helpful. The other thing was, I guess, in terms of the format of today, now I'm biased because I come from an emergency services background, but is there a reason that the community conversation is formatted this way as opposed to an after action review style of format? Because the community may not be aware of what was actually planned prior to the event. in long-term, local emergency management sense, what's actually in place. We can all tell you what happened, but we could also, we're all keen, obviously, to participate in what we can do to improve things. And so I'd just like to, again, thanks for the opportunity. Russell's statistical presentation, go Russell, it was really good. I guess from that are a couple of, again, probably Dorothy Dixer questions, mainly in relation to the South Ward, which is what this community conversation is about.
Could I just jump in there, Sam?
Yeah.
Could I just jump in? Just because your first two statements, they were kind of questions, I wonder if anyone, we want to just open a chance if anyone wanted to respond to those, first of all, around the structure of this this piece, because they seem like they were kind of comments, but out there, if anyone felt to respond from BRV or the council, because otherwise they're just kind of lingering there.
So, Carmel here, I'll jump in. So we worked.
Carmel.
So Steve and I and our teams worked together for the formatting for today, and very happy to take your feedback, Sam. Thank you for providing it, and we'll look to see what we can do to make it, I guess, more engaging, and easier to have a more fulsome engagement, because that's definitely the intention. So thanks for your feedback, and if you're happy for one of the team to give you a call afterwards, just to unpack that in a bit more detail, that'd be. I'd welcome that opportunity if you had the time for that too. Andrew?
I'll let Steve go next if he had his hand up before me.
Carmel's answer. That's right. Sorry, Carmel's answer. So yeah, I was going to suggest in terms of the after action review, that'd be one for you, Andrew.
Yes. So thanks very much, Sam. And this was very much, as I said before, the opportunity to come in and listen in this particular format. What we've done previously is, and through some of the community recovery committees, is actually sort of have a more focused conversation, like bring together reps as we have here, but each of the emergency services actually speak to their preparedness and their response and do it that way. So there'll definitely be further opportunities, probably more through the CRCs and more broadly across sort of the local government area, but happy to pick up on that. If you want to send me something, more than happy to consider it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Anne.
Thanks.
And Carmel.
Great, go for it,
just
Sam.
my last-
And was there another specific question? Yep.
Yeah. Look, just my last question, and it was more to Russell because he's our stats man, which was more about, do we actually know, and I'm probably, how long's a piece of string? Do we actually know how many calls to SES came from the South Ward? I know Council has some great figures on their responses, but on the days, did you have a lot of calls? And also, how many of the first responders, SES, CFA, actually came into the area to respond?
Hey, Sam, how are you? Hope things are all well. We can do that, but at the moment, our agency's actually undergoing our own after action review. So we're starting that process now we did the regional emergency management team last week. We've got the ICC, IMTs to go. Then it'll be our volunteer units, etc. So we haven't sort of discussed this, but this is information that I can get and provide back to this group if that's something that you are actually after. That's easy to get. It's all the numbers come in via 132500. So if someone's reported it would go through there, and then it would generate a job number, etc. And then it would be dispatched to that particular unit, or the same. We could also ask our counterparts at CFA if they wanted to do the same thing. So those numbers are available.
Great.
Does that help?
Thanks, Russell.
Yep. So I've made a note of it, Sam. Yep.
Great, thanks, Sam. I saw you had a thumbs up there, so it seemed like your question was answered. Thank you. So I've got a question from the chat that was posted, and they mentioned due to poor internet connectivity, they've sent it as they've typed it versus putting their hands up. So the question is, we have a large number of big trees down on our property, which are too big for us to tackle with our equipment. What options are available for the cleaning up of these trees? We would like to retain the timber on our property. Is it feasible for you to arrange a contractor to attend the multiple properties who would have the same issue? We also need advice on landslips which have occurred due to the water runoff from HVP plantation, which adjoins our property. Thank you. So who from the agencies would like to respond? Kane, go for it.
It's probably one for both Carmel and I, and afternoon, everyone. Look, probably the first bit is the cleanup program. It's really important that people do register through the 1-800 number so we can assess eligibility for both residential cleanup, which is physical damage to structures, but also hazardous trees that might be hazardous around either the residents or structures on the property or access to the property. There is the option, if you do register as well, for Vic Forest to have a look at properties where there might be a lot of timber that has fallen that might be of commercial value on the property there as well. I think, Carmel, we're also looking at whether there's other options for large amounts of timber where people might want to retain it, but still working through that issue at the moment. With regards to the landslips, you might have heard from Steve earlier, I've set up a regional working group to understand the quantum of the issue. And one of the options we're looking at is what advice can be provided to landholders about what do I do about my landslip? Do I need to do any remediation work? Do I just leave it alone? Because if I touch it, it might make it worse, for example. But we're also just working through that issue at the moment. But I am hoping that we can, on both those issues, have some sort of advice to landholders on a possible way forward in the next few weeks. I don't know, Carmel, if you wanted to add any more to that.
Yeah, thanks, Kane, and thanks for the question. So as you may be aware, normally after emergencies, the responsibility to clean up property is the landowners. And in this case, the scale of destruction and damage across the state was of such magnitude that government supported a state cleanup program for private properties to focus on the cleanup of structures, so of residences that have been destroyed or damaged beyond repair. And to give you a sense of scale of that, there's been more than 20 houses completely destroyed and more than 200 houses with major damage. But also there are other structures across properties such as sheds, etc., that have been destroyed. So the focus of the cleanup program is on the cleanup of structures and of hazards, and that the hazards include hazardous trees that are still standing in the vicinity of structures or access and egress. So that's the absolute number one priority that has been attended to and sits within the scope of the cleanup program. So sitting outside the scope of the cleanup program on private properties are large trees or fallen timber that are not a hazard to structures or to the access to homes. We are aware, though, that there is a scale of literally thousands of these trees that are down across the various areas across the state that have been impacted. So what we have been doing is assessing the scale of what that looks like and providing that advice into government, along with the assessment of a number of other possible recovery issues and needs. And and it may be that there will be additional supports available, but right now we have been focused on cleaning up hazards and structures, assessing the legacy needs of this big fallen timber, and looking at potential options for advice into government on that issue. So where you require additional assistance for fallen trees or for any other matter in regards to recovery from the storms and floods, we're encouraging you to ring our hotline and inform us of that need, so that helps us with our assessment and ability to provide that advice into government.
Great, thanks, Kane. Thanks, Carmel. And to the person who asked that question, invitation, if you'd like to, I think your internet was a bit dodgy, but even if you've got your video off, if you'd like to come off mute, if there is any responses or questions you have, just to open up an opportunity for that. No need, but that's the invitation. No worries. Thank you very much for submitting that question. Steve, I noticed you had your hand up there.
Put it up and took it back down, Henry. I just there were a couple of questions I was checking to see who was in the meeting. So one of the questions did come from, I think it was Bob Hingst, if I've got that correct, which was about he wanted an update on restoration of Budgery Road, including the bank landslip stabilisation and road conditions between Townsend's Road and White Horse Track. So I did get, thanks for putting that in early, Bob, so I was able to get the team to give me just a bit of an update. So they've said just in relation to the initial remediation in the next couple of weeks in terms of getting that in place, but that won't be the landslip. So there's still a bit more work to be done around assessment of that landslip from an engineering perspective. But in terms of the initial remediation, they've said the next 2 weeks is the plan to get that done. But I'll get one of the team to get in touch with you as well more directly to give you an update. It's probably best. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Bob? Were you there? Yeah.
I do actually have another couple of questions, if I may, not directly related to the landslips and the roads.
Now we've got you started, Bob, you can fire away.
Good, thank you. The first off is about information about road closures. During the event, we noticed that we were going to Vic Roads a lot to see what roads were open, what roads weren't, because there were people in the area that needed to get access. And they weren't accurately, Vic Roads wasn't accurately reflecting the on-the-ground information that we had. And for instance, Budgery Road was showing as open in the entire directions, and it wasn't. And that was causing a lot of confusion with people about, do they have access or do they not? Now that was the first part of the question. I'm not sure if it can respond to me straight away there. The second,
just that was something that was raised during the event, and I did follow up with my team in terms of the notifications that were provided and what was being updated. And so at times I did note that there were some issues in terms of it not being updated in a timely fashion, and so that's something I suppose part of the after action review we'll definitely have a look at. There were updates provided through that system in terms of updating. Andrew might be able to add a bit more to that, but at times I do acknowledge, even I was aware of that, and we did try to address that as the event unfolded.
Thanks, Steve. Over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, I'll just add just one comment, and just really to echo Steve's comments, and thanks, Bob. Yeah, I was in the same boat. You know, I was going to the Vic Roads website as well, and at times that, you know, and I'll be honest, they were overwhelmed, so it was slow. But then that's not good enough. So what can we do to fix that for future events? And if it means more people on the ground, more people locally to actually feed that information in. So there is a specific after action review looking at roads and transport. So yeah, we will definitely pick up on that.
Excellent.
Thanks, Andrew. Back to you, Bob. Do you say you had another question?
Yes, and this was perhaps a little out of scope, but it was in terms of our mobile phone access. Now, we lost our landline because of landslips, etc., through plantations. So we're relying pretty much on having mobile reception coverage. Now, it's very shaky out here in this area, and we understand that. We knew that when we moved here. But after about, I think it was 24, maybe 36 hours, it dropped out completely. So there was nothing available at all. So luckily we have satellite NBN and we were able to get calls out. But for people that weren't in that position, we're just wondering, like, is there any means that Telstra would be able to perhaps supply power? I believe the problem lay in that the batteries at the transmitter tower, whatever the case may be, ran out. And that left us more or less without communications. So I put a submission in about the black spot eradication program, but I haven't heard anything back from that. And I was just wondering, did other people have that same situation where they weren't without communications, and that just added to not having power and not having access to roads?
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, concern there. Go to you, Andrew, again.
Yeah, Bob, you know, to answer your last part of your question, there were many people, people off power, direct impact to telecommunications towers. other situations where people couldn't get into the towers in terms of reconnecting or replacing batteries. Battery backup was not long enough. So I think there are, I think I said in a couple of press conferences, there's got to be, again, ways of doing this better in the future. So Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions, they sort of have the government lead in relation to that aspect of critical infrastructure. So they are leading a piece of work around telecommunications. So definitely, that will definitely feature in a public report coming out of this event.
If I can add to that as well, Andrew, yeah, Bob, there's a regional telecommunications review happening at the moment. I'm not quite sure whether you mentioned you've already submitted to that. So that's open for submissions till the 30th of September. We've, as part of the collective of regional cities, Victoria will be making a submission to that and particularly focused on events of this type into the future. So that's another avenue for us to raise that with government in terms of improving communications into the future. So that's that had come up previously as well in terms of a significant issue during this event.
Thanks,
unless
Stephen.
Bob's got another question. I did have another one I noticed there.
We've got a few other questions rolling on the chat. So we might have to keep going, but I really appreciate your questions there, Bob, and your concern for your community. I really felt your concern for others around you in your last piece. Your last question about the telecommunications. Lovely to feel. So a question to the SES. We had a tree fall. This is from the chat. We had a tree fall on the corner of our house. I attempted to ring the SES multiple times morning of Thursday, 10th of June, and could not get through. Well, I understand the load that the SES suffered through this event. It was a distressing time. Eventually, I got through on the Friday, but had to drive to Traralgon to get a tarp to keep the water out of the house. The focus seemed to be on flooded areas rather than storm-damaged properties. So, yeah, really challenging times there. Thank you for your question/story. And SES, would someone from the SES like to respond?
Thanks, Henry, and thanks to the community member that submitted this particular question. Although I can't talk on this specific case because I'm not aware of it, I can feel the community member's frustration that it did occur, and I suppose with the load that the SES had on both days, and I suppose what occurred in the Dandenongs as well with the amount of jobs up there and 9,000 requests for assistance over a short period of time, it was one of the busiest for SES. So there was that issue getting through on the phone, but I'm happy to take this question up as part of our own agency after action review, and then I'll be able to find out what actually occurred and report back to the group once I know. But hopefully that answers their question, but I don't know the specifics of the case, and it's probably not for me to speculate what should have been done or what could have been done. I'll just take it back as part of the after action review, if that's okay. But I do stress though is that if that 132-500 phone number is for flood and storm, but if it's an emergency and if you were trapped in your house or there was a medical emergency attached to it, then straight through to 000 next time. So if that's come down across your house and you're not getting through to 132-500 and you are trapped and it is an emergency, then 000 and you'll get an all agency response rather than just the SES. So just food for thought next time. But thanks for that question, and I'll take it back to the after action review. Hopefully that's thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Henry.
That's great. I'm really sorry to hear about the person's distress, what they went through there, as you mentioned. So thank you so much for your question, and hope that was responded adequately from Russell. So we've got another question here. We've got 10 minutes to go, so I'll keep pushing us through. If you've got last chance to kind of put your hand up, if you're in the space. There's another question came through from the chat. The question for Latrobe City Council, because we had no internet, we were conserving mobile power. We had no idea of what was available to help us with no power, no water pressure, and a tree on our house. My daughter, who is in the UK, provided us with that information, as well as Russell North. on Saturday the 12th. Information was very slow to get to people. So that was a bit of a kind of comment there too. It was a question, it was stated as a question to Latrobe City Council. So Steve, do you want to respond?
Yeah, happy to jump in there, Henry. Even in terms of the last question about the initial focus of the event was, from my perspective, primarily around the flooding within Traralgon. So we had a lot of resources that were in that space. Then we moved out to the rural areas. There were teams who were working on that up front in terms of tree clearing and the like, but in terms of where our resources were able to be allocated in terms of the cleanup and providing people with access, that's sort of where that came from. In terms of the communications, we did set up a relief centre initially in Traralgon, and as I said, that was probably as the focus was on those houses that were flooded. Then we set up a relief centre in Yanar, and there was some newsletters that the SES had provided as part of that, and we tried to distribute those out to the community. But it was particularly, I suppose, with the communications issue that was occurring, to acknowledge that people probably didn't have access to internet and the like, and there was a lot of information in this day and age that goes on social media that some people just probably wouldn't have had access to. And so we did have sessions in the following week at the Yanar general store and the like, and out in the community, letting people know with newsletters. The SES, I think, were dropping some of those off, as I understand, and our teams were out meeting with people, but it was... And some people couldn't get out to be able to let us know what was going on. So I know of some examples where I think a drone had to go in and deliver medicine on one occasion to a property, I was advised. And then clearing of some of those properties to gain access did take a number of days. So it was particularly challenging. But in terms of how we might improve that in the future, happy to receive that feedback. But yeah, there was attempts made. But yeah, there were some I suppose, some challenges in that.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for your response. I just want to check in. I think I might have missed someone putting their hand up before.
I think it was Peter.
I think.
No, I think Ella Horton had her hand up, Henry. I don't know if you've got Al, if she's still there, but
Al had her hand up.
Yeah. I am here, but the internet is very bad.
Maybe
if your internet's really bad, then if you have your maybe a video off, and we'll see how we go.
The video is off.
Great, I can hear you.
Okay, I did just put on.
Well, you seem to be fading out. Did you say you have put it on the chat? Yeah, I think I've got it now. So I can read it out for you if you'd like, and then we can sort of try our best to hear you, but we've got you live. So thank you for submitting on the chat. Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Al.
Al, thanks, Al. So Al's question: we would have over 100 trees down on our property. Removal costs would be very sizable. They aren't hazardous or on structures, so don't currently meet the criteria for assistance. I look forward to the result of your submission to government about assistance available, as these trees are blocking all of our access tracks except our driveway, they are preventing us from using our paddocks, and will be a huge risk factor come bushfire season, as we won't have access to all areas of our property. So opening that to agencies who
that's
respond
me.
to that. Carol,
Thanks.
go for it, Carmel.
Al, was it? Al Horton? So
Al.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And all I can say is that you're not alone in that situation. I'm really sorry that is what you're faced with, and it was just such a incredible event to have had that widespread damage that it has had, including on properties such as yours. I would only reiterate what I said before, where I think if you have already checked in with us, then we're aware of your circumstances, and we're consolidating your information with other property owners who may be in similar situations to yours, and just the scale of downed timber on private properties and what that means in terms of options for government. It's not a straightforward question. It would set precedents that haven't occurred before in the past to fully clean up private properties. That's So it's a bit of a challenging situation, Al. But we're happy to keep you informed with where we're at over time. And as I said, our initial priorities have been very much on the hazardous trees and the structures. Thanks.
Thanks, Carmel. Al, I don't know if you'd like to try and respond.
Thank you. That was good. We will keep following debate with any changes.
Thanks, Al. I heard a thank you at the start, and then it seemed to fade out. So if you'd like to respond again, please do in the chat, and we'll read it out. Thank you, Al. And sorry for your experience, and sorry for your internet connection right now. So look, I've got a comment from Lorraine saying thank you for the response from SES. Russell has asked, got you, that's good. So we've got that, thank you, Lorraine. And I'm going to go to Carolyn, if you'd like to ask a question, then we'll go to Peter if we've got time. Go for it, Carolyn.
Mine's not actually a question, but it's really, I guess, in support of what Al was just speaking about. This area, as we had the fire only in 2019, we still had a lot of timber lying around in that area that we just do not have the type of machinery that can clear that, what we already had from the fire, because of the angle of the hills that we've got out there, how steep it is, and the size of those huge trees that had come down. And now this has just been absolutely exacerbated by the storm. Now, I understand that it's setting a new precedent, but I really have to stress to all government agencies, if we don't do something about this in the next 3 to 4 months, we have a major bushfire risk sitting out there. Major. Okay, and I really need to stress to you that I'm not interested in precedents. Something has to be done, or we've got a huge problem sitting out there on those hills.
Thanks, Carolyn. I feel the urgency in your voice. So thank you for sharing. And I'll open up to the agencies who would like to respond. Just come off mute.
There was, Henry, there was some private clearing of lands as a result of Black Saturday. There was a fair bit undertaken in Latrobe City by contractors organised by, I don't know if it was BRV then, but that did occur.
Okay, so you're acknowledging that some removal of trees did occur?
Yeah,
back then?
Yeah.
Yes. You know, I think you'll find that they were funded by the Victorian Bushfire Appeal Fund back then.
Yeah, it could have been, yeah.
Back then there was a reconstruction authority, but I just want to highlight here, this is not, these are not agencies pushing back on not wanting to help in these circumstances. These are matters for, these are government policy decisions, and we'll do whatever we can to amplify your voice and your advocacy for the issues that most matter to you into government to make those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Carmel. And just to acknowledge, Carolyn, I felt the concern in your voice and the urgency of wanting these cleared. So I really appreciate you sharing. And yeah. Great. Okay. So we've only got 3 minutes left, and I'm where we need to hear from John from the community. Peter, did you have something else you needed to?
Henry, it was only to echo the stuff around comms channels. One of the things I found really frustrating early on was, you know, there was the stuff on social media, there was stuff on websites, there was stuff delivered, and it was challenging to try to understand what was going on and coming from whom. So it's a specific issue that I've got, and I'll feed that back to Latrobe City. In times like, and I appreciate one comms channel can't get everybody, but I don't think anybody knew what the collective choice was. Oh, there was so much coming out. It was a challenge to understand what's the latest, who's it coming from, who's commenting on roads. Right. So I'll just provide that back in my feedback.
Thanks, Peter. I think the feedback's been received, and I saw a bunch of people nodding their heads. So valuable feedback to have to simplify the comms channels. Now wary of time now. Steve, I can notice you've got your hand up if you had a quick response. And Carolyn, your hand is still up. Was that another thing no, it was just the Zoom function. No worries. If you just click your hand down. Steve, did you want to quickly respond? And then I'd love to go to...
yeah, I was going to ask whether you can let
John?
whether John was going to be chatting. That was all just about the CRC process, which I think Peter might have already nominated for, I'd heard, which would be good, Peter, in terms of feeding that through to the team around the comms issues. So Gail and the team will be able to pick that up with Lauren soon. Unless you're being voluntold, I'm not quite sure.
I'll be kind. I'll be kind. No, I will be.
So John Harris, we're going to hand to you now, and John is going to talk about the South Ward CDRC representation updates. He's going to talk about the CRC. So go for it, John. Unmute yourself, and then we'll hear you.
Thanks, Henry. Hi, I'm John Harris. I'm Deputy Chair of the Community Recovery Committee for the 2019 bushfire, which burnt through Budgeree, Jumbuck and Yanar South communities. The Chair of our committee, Annette Depler, is also with us this afternoon, and other members of the committee, as you've heard. Cassandra, could we put up that first slide?
Cassandra's just telling me.
Won't be a moment, John. Cassandra's her screen has just frozen, so she's having some technical issues.
Okay.
So we'll see. We'll wait to see if the slide comes up. But if you can keep going ad hoc, then, John, without the slide.
Yep. Okay. Look, my role today for these few minutes is to speak particularly to community members toward. And the focus is, where do we go from here in relation to community involvement, your involvement in storm flood recovery in South Ward? This is not about the agencies and the terrific work that's being done. It's about the community's involvement and our role in responding to recovery. Today's conversation has enabled us as community members to meet with and to hear from the representatives of the various agencies. It's also allowed you to ask questions and raise at least some recovery issues and to have them recorded. What I want to do is to invite community members to take another step and to actually join a volunteer recovery team for your local community. Following the conversation sessions, we'll be seeking volunteers for a recovery team in each of 8 localities in South Ward. And they're not all single localities, some of them are grouped. So Ballara is grouped with Darlamurla and Delburn. Ballara South grouped with Merboo. Budgeree grouped with Grand Ridge. Churchill as a locality on its own. Geeralang Junction grouped with Geeralang. And Jumbuck, Yanar and Yanar South as separate localities. So 8 individual localities or groups. Those volunteer recovery teams will focus on the issues in their locality. They don't have to try to cope with issues across the whole of South Ward. So the teams aren't expected to carry out the actual recovery work. That's not the role we're looking at for community members. We know people have gone out and volunteered with chainsaws and trailers and whatever else. That's not the role we're looking for here. That's for the staff and the contractors of council and the agencies. These volunteer teams will act as the eyes and ears. Thanks, Cassandra.
We've got some slides for you now, John. So which slide are we up to? Maybe number 2?
Can we go to 3, please?
Number 3? No worries.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kane.
Just quickly, that's the set of localities and the locality recovery teams are to act as the eyes and ears of their community and as the voice of that community. And the voice will be relayed through the team's elected representative and with a deputy elected by the team as well. Next slide. The locality team's representative will become a member of the South Ward Community Disaster Recovery Committee. So you might say, what's the role then of a community recovery committee? How does it fit with the agencies and council? The official document says this: the Community Recovery Committee is established by Latrobe City Council to act as the community organisation with responsibility for leading the recovery of the South Ward community following an emergency. The purpose of the CRC is to lead community management of community recovery and rebuilding of affected communities. So it's an extremely important role for community members to be able to contribute to. Now, because we already have a Community Recovery Committee which is well established and operating to lead the recovery from the 2019 bushfire, the South Ward CRC will be built as an extension of that current Community Recovery Committee. That will enable us to apply what we've learned over the past 2 years, and we've learned a lot, to get more recovery activity happening quicker in relation to the 2021 storm and flood. Annette Depler's term as chair and my term as deputy chair are due to run until June of next year, but we've asked that they be open for new elections in January, so the CRC members, those team representatives who form the CRC, will have the opportunity of changing those positions if they wish. Can I urge everyone, community members, to respond when the invitation is issued and to join your locality recovery team? Thanks.
Great, thank you, John. And so inspiring to hear your voice from the community. And so encourage you to respond to that invite, as John said, when you receive that. And final last words, we're at time. I want to thank all of you from the community who have shared today and who have listened, for sharing your concerns, your comments, your feedback. It's really appreciated. And I really want to thank all the agencies for attending, for all of you who've attended on this Saturday afternoon. And I just want to reiterate to encourage you to visit, for the community to visit the council's websites for updates over the coming days and week. And also just want to reiterate that comments and questions submitted in the chat will be captured and responded to at a later date. So if you have any final questions or things, you're welcome to put them in the chat now. Great. Thank you very much to everyone for coming. We've hit time and really appreciate you all attending again. And I hope you have a lovely Saturday evening. Cheers. Take care.
Thanks
So
very much.
you're welcome to unmute yourselves to have a bit of a human goodbye.
Thank you.
Hey.
Can someone stop the
Thanks,
rain?
everyone.
Anybody on screen, stop the rain. We have had enough. We're full of rain. Come on, you lot should be able to do
Thanks,
it.
Henry.
Cheerio.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Henry,
everyone. See ya.
Thanks, Henry.
Henry, are you still on?
Yes.
Henry, I got in late because I didn't have internet. How can I get the recording so I can hear it all? The session was recorded. How do I access that?
We'll put that on the website as well, Henry. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So that'll
No
be on the
worries.
council website too. No worries. Thanks for your question.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Pleasure. Cheers. You too.